Afternoon, Chris. How you doing?
All good, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm very well. Firstly, thank you for agreeing to come on and do a bit of an interview, a bit of business spotlight with your company, Bodii. I think I've had a bit of a chat with you before. It's absolutely incredible, like what's going on in the background, and also the visions you've got for the business. So I can't wait to get into the questions. So, just to give a bit of context around the interview, if you could just first give us a quick overview of what Bodii is and yeah, who it's meant for and how it works.
Body is a wearable enabled health tech solution that allows physiotherapy patients to stay engaged during their recovery process. So we've developed a solution that allows an individual who's particularly recovering from physical injury, so it might be a joint related problem, to actually map their range of movement easily using our sensor and a mobile app.
Yeah. When you said that about stay engaged, it made me think of a stat that apparently um, less people take their own medicine than give their dog medicine. So if the dog's ill, they'll give them medicine like every day without fail, like morning, noon, at night to the minute. Whereas if they're ill, they just won't take they'll do it for a couple of days or doing, carry on. So is that something that you found as like a gap in the market that people are going to the physio, but then they're not necessarily doing the work?
Yeah, that's precisely it. I knew that there was a problem in the space that people weren't having amazing recovery journeys. And we can come to my story a bit later on, but it's when access to quality, consistent care is so high, people are really reliant on just self-managing. So you might go into a clinic, be it public or private, and they kind of get you to go away and self manage yourself, and that's really important, and people should take control of their own health, and they should be motivated to do it. However, in reality, people go away and then they put away the leaflet or the sheath, or they say they're doing the exercises. They'll come back for their follow-up, and be like, yeah, I did it, and I'm not feeling great anymore. And like in reality, no one has. There's actually data which shows what that level is, and 70% of people actually don't follow on with their plan. So there's a huge gap there. And I guess when you think about like the actual levels of waiting lists, follow-up rates in healthcare, and what the stress is, and how there's a huge uh, there's not enough supply of physiotherapists, and people actually can solve these problems by just being a bit more engaged, being a bit more fine-tuned, educated in their health. There's a huge opportunity, and we're trying to solve that.
Awesome. So tell us a bit more about your journey then. So and your story, like how did you? It's a really niche thing for you to think about. Yeah, getting into. So tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of passion into it. So I started Body like after a lot of poor experiences. So I was, like many people, an aspiring footballer. I was playing at a fairly decent level, committed, and the dream was always to play football. And then when I was 17, tore my ACL in my knee. So it's like quite a big knee injury. Sometimes requires operation, sometimes it doesn't. Different physios will argue, and different surgeons will argue. But it does have a huge impact, because if you don't get your recovery right, what tends to happen is that you'll typically have follow-on injuries, or if you're not very well taken care of and you don't have a long-term outlook on how you're preparing, how you're recovering to sport, or just getting back to daily life, it has a longer term issue, and most people might have re-injury, re-tear. So I ultimately tore my ligaments 3 times, had like hamstring problems, a bunch of crazy issues. And that was because I just didn't have the right level of care. Now, moving around didn't help, so I moved countries. But then there were so many barriers to actual good quality health. And so I wanted to solve that problem, and I kind of started to tamper with the idea about the back end of COVID. And then just worked at it. Our initial approach to solving this problem was way different. So like the business has evolved incredibly. We actually wanted to develop a pain management device. And it's just stemmed from doing a lot of customer discovery, a lot of speaking to the right people in the ecosystem. And today we're kind of in a really strong position solving a very niche problem. And I think that really helps create opportunities rather than trying to do everything at once and solve all the problems at the beginning, which would be wasting a lot of money without actually having the right data to back yourself up.
Incredible. So you've been going a few years. How has the journey been over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so we were back in April, we were still in idea stage. So we raised a round of funding when we were still in idea, which was fairly lucky. And we really only started development about last June, July, and that's when we started prototyping, and then started developing an app towards the end of the year, an MVP app. Now, because I'm non-technical, I had to rely on other partners, and so it's like a bit of a weird dynamic, as many other non-technical founders will find. So it's kind of a learning process for you as a founder, especially when you're first time in the tech world, trying to build something venture scalable. So that's really difficult, and I think over the past year and a half, it's been a learning curve of how do you build the right tech leanly without actually wasting too much money, but also ensuring that you're actually building the right commercial avenues. That's a bit of a challenge as well. And just balancing those has been a real learning curve. I actually worked on the business part-time between when I started and up until July. So I had a couple of other roles within tech and within ventures, which was great because I actually learned much more from it. But then quit my role in July and went full-time into the business. And since that's happened, we've just accelerated a lot of the development and commercial partnerships. And we're now fundraising as well.
Amazing. So if you could go back all over to the beginning, what would you have done differently?
Yeah. It's easy to look back at things in hindsight. I think
think of the answer as if somebody else was in your shoes a year ago, what advice would you give them now that you didn't know then?
I think find a way to be in the business full time as quickly as possible. You know, when you're completely focused and you don't have any other things that you have to cross over with, kind of allows you to really accelerate and put all your mind and thought into actually solving the problem. I think another thing is don't overlook speaking to people. Like I put off actually talking to patients and physios for much longer than I should have. And I think when you do that much earlier on, even before, I actually did it after we raised investment, and I wish we did before, because I think we could have actually built a better opportunity for ourselves when we think of valuations, money, etc., etc. If we actually did that before raising investment, because you kind of cultivate a much better message, you cultivate a much better idea proposition, you'll actually understand what problem you're solving way more after you speak to about 100 people about what you're doing. So I guess that would be the big thing. I also think you don't need to raise too much money to begin with. If you can find a way to build an MVP really cheaply in a few months and allow yourself to sustain living. You don't necessarily have to jump to raising money from venture investors, because that brings a whole lot of other problems, and it kind of makes you lose focus from actually solving the problem and being engaged.
Cool. So in terms of being an employer, then is this your first business you've been involved in, or have you run other businesses before?
No, first tech business. So I've not first time founder in my 20s. We've done a few other projects in the past, which have been really fun with friends. This has been a huge learning curve. We don't have any full-time employees, but we work with a number of consultants and team members sporadically. That allows us to actually keep a low burn rate and extend run, which is pretty important at this stage, at least when we're really high risk. So it's been, it's been a learning to figure out who you want to work with, and not try to be phased by some of their past experiences or what they can promise, but maybe over deliver. So I think for me, the biggest thing is just figure out whether you trust the person, whether they're passionate about the business. And if they are, I think everything else kind of falls into place. People that we're working with, we get Mark, Jack, who's just come on board. They're all people who kind of believe in the problem we're solving. They've got really good experience behind them, but are just passionate. And they want to work with me. They want to work with somebody that's exciting. The most important thing for me when choosing people to work with.
And how have you managed to grasp whether people are passionate about it or not? Like, what are the things that you look for?
I think it's really down to you can work with someone without them being an employee. You can work with them without having to pay them. And if they're willing to work with you, if they've shared ideas, they've taken a proactive approach to trying to help the business, I think that's a very quick way. So if they're like ready helping you make introductions, they're talking about the business as if it was their own. That gives you
brought into the vision, the shared common goal.
Yeah, so it's like it's like if you and I were having this conversation and you would say, "Oh, we could do this. Oh, this is what the aspiration is. Maybe we should talk to these people." I think it comes to gut as well a lot of the time. You can tell by meeting someone if you like them or not. And I had co-founders in the business before, and ultimately it didn't work out. That was before we raised investment, and they were great people, really intelligent. But at the same time, you kind of have that gut feeling that maybe in the long term this might not work out, and ultimately that's okay. And I think you figure that out early, and that's a good thing about not having full-time employees yet, is because you don't have to be tied into actually having people who aren't passionate or want to see the business through. When we're at such an early stage of the business, it requires a lot of hours, a lot of thought, and it's not exactly like working a full-time job in a corporate environment. However, someone might think about work-life balance. It's like it's more difficult than something that's a bit more 9 to 5-ish. So you need someone who's a bit more committed and is willing to just answer you, message them at midnight and whatnot. I'm sure any future employees would hate to have heard that.
How do you balance that then? So there's loads of people out there that, you need to work 16, 18, 20 hours a day. Obviously, as a founder, you've got a lot. So how do you manage your time? How do you and also balance personal life as well?
Yeah, it's balancing time is the hardest thing, I guess, for me. I like to. I have things that I do that makes me happy. I mean, I play football still, so I play for a local football team. So twice a week, meet up with friends, training, get excited for the weekend, go down. It's like these things make me happy. I spend a lot of time with my partner, which helps, and you know having a partner who kind of backs what you do and is not worried about how little time she might be spending with you helps as well, because it's not something you have to worry about. But I'm comfortable spending longer hours on the business because I'm passionate about it, focused. I can see where we're going. I get motivation from family, friends. So it doesn't bother me as much. But I do take time on my own. I'm full up. I don't wake up early. I'm pretty lazy in the morning. I wake up pretty late. When I say late, it's about 8:39. But that's just because I'm inefficient in the morning, so there's no point in me being open early. So I typically stay up later, and get work done. But I think there's there's no real balance you can have at the early stages that we are at now. It's just be focused and have gaps and do nice things with fun people that will take your mind away. I had lunch with a friend this afternoon, um, and it was great because I could step away from the business and then crack on when I come back. So yeah.
How have you found, so when I speak to a lot of business owners, certainly the younger ones, there's like, there's sometimes a bit of a challenge in terms of maybe the friendship groups that when they started off with, they might have jobs, you as a founder or business owner, and then you go into this world and it's totally new. And you know, so how have you found it easy to, you know, meet other peers and other people that are on the same journey as you to help, you know, to discuss these? Because it's quite of a really unique thing that there's not many people know what it's like to go through this. What
Yeah,
you're
so it's funny because um, it's a challenge, right? You have to say no a lot of the times to going out and going for drinks on the weekend, for example. But I'm completely fine with it. You know, love my friends, and you know, when you're passionate about it, they see the passion and they support you as well, regardless if they care or not about physiotherapy and the problem we're solving. So that helps. But personally, I've joined a few founder groups. So I'm part of this founder funding group. So it's a group of like 10 founders who are fundraising, and they know the struggle that every one of us is facing fundraising. So I'm part of a non-technical founders group as well. Um, and you know, you don't spend time texting people all the time, but every now and then you see some of the struggles someone's facing, and it's exactly the same thing you're facing. That keeps you going because you know you're not on your own.
really interesting. What's been the most influential book you've ever read, Chris?
I really enjoyed 0 to 1, Peter Thiel. But right now I'm in the middle of Build, which is by Tony Fidel, I think his name is. And I'd say that's probably one of the best books I read, mostly because it's very in line with what we're doing right now, because he worked on a lot of hardware, software businesses that had a bit of crossover, hardware enabled businesses. So it kind of allowed me to kind of think about my frame of mind, and how do we approach problems. And it's really good because it describes ways in which consumers perceive products. And there's this really funny bit where he talks about the Google Nest, and how people loved the screwdriver that came in the box, even though that wasn't even the product. But that was a form of marketing, because most people didn't have that small screwdriver.
Yeah.
But it was just it kind of opened my eyes into thinking about how do you create great user experiences along the whole journey, from the time when someone like goes to your site, but also like during the time when they're waiting for product to arrive, during the time when they receive product, and maybe follow up. Like how do you kind of um, take take it all from one journey and make it into mini journeys, I, where we're actually working on how we can approach that now business, because I think it's critical to make sure that someone has a great experience at like all of those points, rather than just, yep, they subscribe to our hardware or they've purchased a device and now they're just on their own. I think if you get all those little bits right, it just makes it a much better overall experience. So that book's had a huge influence on how I'm trying to approach problems.
Have you found that your readings changed over your journey, like as you, oh shit, I've got this problem and I need to think about, you know, this, or and the more people you're speaking to, yeah,
I found what's changing.
the type of reading that you are doing, so the books that you're reading,
Yeah,
is
I'm
that
reading less,
okay?
less time. So maybe few more podcasts, because I can do that on the go. Um, I think I've always been interested in startup fundraising related books. I think it is way more fine-tuned to like where I'm at in the journey, and I'm looking for little snippets that can help me. And maybe if you looked at my podcast listen history, you'd probably see that, because I'm watching things about fundraising, watching things about wearables and how the future of health is changing. And I think it's important to stay up to date as a founder, so that you know what other tech companies are doing, you know how investors are viewing wearables and health tech. Sometimes books don't give you that too often, and sometimes books can make very simple things a bit long-winded. So you might spend 100 pages reading something that could have taken a page for you to actually understand. So less reading, but more podcasts, just because it's easier to go.
So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? What's the 5-year vision or 10-year vision? What's the vision for the company? Where are you trying to get to with all this?
I don't know. I don't know. It's I think I don't know if it's a cliche that people have. I don't necessarily have a 10-year vision. I think what I'd like to see over the next 3 years, I like to think of it on smaller. I'd like to see us really developing products so that we're not relying on uh, very high friction distribution channels. So I want to be able to deliver our solution at scale whenever someone has a physical injury. And if someone has a problem, I don't want them to have to wait 2 months to go see a physio. If we can add value and improve people's lives before that'd be a happy place. Now, the way our tech is now, we can't do that yet. It's still very much niched out. But as we grow, as we develop, as we build reputation, I think in about 3 years, I'd like us to be in that position. That's how I look at it. I don't necessarily think about the exit or the big money sale or anything like that to begin with. I think we just, are we solving the problem? Can we get that gap between someone actually seeing a physio and not much down? Can we make them adhere to exercises better? Can they be happier, live a better life? I think that's more of a priority for me, rather than thinking about making it a $5 billion business, even though that would be great and I'd be really happy. I'm sure that will come with its stresses. There's no point doing it if you're not actually solving that core problem.
Mm. And in terms of referencing to like the books that you read, this is, and then in like nowadays, obviously technology is moving so much faster than what it was back when some of these books would have been written. So are you finding now that, like when you just picking up what you said there, where we'd like to do developing things, but the technology is not there yet, but we're sort of guessing that it's going to be there in 2 years or a year's time or 3 years' time. Are you sort of like having to predict where technology is going to be and then hoping that technology is there by the time you get to that point in your business? And how do you think that's changed, you know, in today's society versus 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
I don't think it's necessarily that technology as a whole is not there. I think it's more about how people perceive the tech and what their willingness to interact with the tech is, right? So 10 years ago, how interested would I be in understanding sleep data if it wasn't coming from a sleep doctor? Whereas now I wear my Oura ring and I look at that daily. It's like 10 years ago, how interested would I be in taking brain care supplements? But I do that now because I'm educated on it. I understand the benefits. I understand what the added value is. And I think COVID has helped accelerate people's willingness to interact with health data because they understand it a bit more. People have been taking a more active interest in dumbing down complex messages and making it easy to understand. I hate to talk about it. Generative AI is doing a great thing in the sense that we can actually democratize access to quick feedback. Now, the issue with that is that it tends to be quite generic. So that's a huge risk. People typically need fine-tuned, personalized advice. And that will grow with time and with more data being created. So I think it's more about making sure that we're not trying to spend too much money building something that no one knows they need yet. That's why we're really focused on working with physiotherapists, educating them to educate the patient, because that creates a more reliable journey flow and something that people are more willing to uptake now. And with time, I think as we educate, we build profile, and the likes of Whoop, Aura, and all these other wearables increase, even Apple Watches and heart rate monitors, things like that. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, people are going to really take control of that health data without needing to rely as heavily on going into a clinic. Although that's really important still.
Yeah, I can imagine the market becoming huge as, yeah, I was just thinking about it, and like, you've got the Whoops,
You also got to think,
it's the matching technology up with the body, with what's going on in your body. It's huge, isn't it?
yeah, and I think the big challenge is, I face it a lot of time when I'm talking with a product manager, for example, and the team is like, I want to do many more things, but it's just being really mindful that trying to do more features without having the data to back up that development is not always the best path, just because, once again, you want to build sustainably in the sense that you want to build in line with what the patient expectations are and where they're up to now. When we have lots of funding, like the likes of the big guys do, they can actually build 2 to 3 years ahead of today, which makes it easier for them to take risks, and we don't. So it's just finding that balance, Best example is the glasses method just released. Google, I think it was Google that tried to release glasses a number of years ago, and they just looked super odd. They did the exact same thing. They look super odd, but like, people just didn't know how to use it. It just didn't make sense for the consumer. But it takes time to actually figure that out. And I saw that release from them last week, and I was like, I want one of those. So, whereas I didn't want one of those like a few years ago. So it's about just making sure it's done in a timely manner.
And even Google can get things wrong. If you think, how do they ever make a mistake with the amount of money they've got, the people they've got, the brains they've got behind them? It's like, how do they ever get anything wrong?
There's so many stories of that happening, right? Pretty sure in that book I was reading Build about how they presented the iPod. The iPhone was presented at Tony's last company, and they just rejected it. It's like, once again, everything's great in hindsight. So yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything that I should be asking you that I've not asked you already, Chris?
No, it's a really exciting time. Sometimes I seem as a founder that it's stressful and difficult, but I just love what we do, because when you get the buy-in from people in the industry, not necessarily like your family and friends, but you get the buy-in from people in the industry who are working in it day in, day out. That gives you the motivation that you're solving a good problem. So that keeps me going, and I enjoy that bit. I guess there's so many challenges that come with it that makes it fun, because one moment you're really happy because you had a great investor call, and then the next moment something gets screwed up. So I think just enjoying that is really important.
Awesome. All right, Chris, well, it's been so great to speak to you. I think it's been absolutely fascinating in terms of that health tech, where it's going, and your business. Where can people find you? Is anywhere people interested? What's the best way people?
I'm really overly active on LinkedIn. I've started tweeting recently. So LinkedIn, just Chris Fernandes. Twitter, I think it's Chris A. Fernandes. Our company handles we are Bodii, across all platforms.
Awesome. Okay, Chris, thanks so much. We'll wrap it up there.
Sweet.